The Civil War was the bloodiest 4 years in American history. Spanning from 1861 to 1865, Americans were forced once again to fight for freedoms that they desired.
Differences between the free states in the North and the slave states in the South caused tensions to build up. This included contrasting lifestyles that couldn't always see eye to eye. The North was comprised of small farmsteads and large-scale industry. There were abundant natural resources, effective transportation, and thriving urban centers. Slave labor had been replaced by immigrant workers from Europe. The South consisted of large-scale farms and the production of cash crops, such as tobacco and cotton. Their economy was dependent on slave labor. There was a lack of urban areas, and transportation was ineffective.
Both regions were fighting for control of the federal government, and when Lincoln won the presidential election, the South erupted, eventually resulting in the seceding of 7 southern states and the creation of the Confederate States of America. These tensions finally resulted in conflict at Fort Sumter when the Confederate Army took control of the fort and began firing on the federal garrison. Lincoln called the militia to fight against the Confederates.
The Civil War fostered the development of new technologies that not only changed the way people fought, but also the way they lived. New weapons such as the rifle and the repeaters allowed soldiers to reload faster and have greater accuracy and range. Other new technologies, such as the railroad and telegraph, allowed for easy transportation and communication across the nation. All of these technological advances were much more readily available to the North than the South. This huge advantage to the North was a large factor of their eventual victory.
The strengths and weaknesses of the North and South sides in the Civil War were very vast. At first glance, it seemed like the Union would win by a landslide on account of the fact that the North was the more industrialized of the two regions. The Union, or the North, had over 21 million people living in its 23 states. This meant that there were a larger pool for the Northerners to pick from when it came to putting together an army. In contrast, the Confederates only had 9 million people in its 11 states, which also included 3.5 million slaves who were not about to fight for the South. The North was the industrial capital of the United States, and so it had access to 97% of the nation's firearms, 90% of the cloth and shoes, and 96% of all the railroad materials. The South had only 1/9 of that industrial potential, and it did not have one rifle work in its region. And to add on to the North's overwhelming advantages, it also had control of the Navy. One might automatically count the South out for the count, but the Confederates also had some tricks up its sleeves. The Confederates had 8 military colleges, which provided them with some of the best war generals and leadership. They could also produce all of their food because they were the agricultural hubbub for the nation. The South also had the home court advantage, which made it easier for them to harass Northerners as they tried to invade. The last thing the South had was the morals to want to win. They were fighting to keep their lifestyle while the North was trying to make a change.
Some key people to set the stage properly included Robert E. Lee, who was the main Confederacy general, Ulysses S. Grant, who was the top Union general and had a major victory at Vicksburg, and Abraham Lincoln, who was the president over the war. He ordered the Emancipation Proclamation and delivered the Gettysburg Address.
Major battles of the Civil War included the 1961 South Carolina attacks on Fort Sumter. The North severely underestimated the South, and they were beat by the Confederates in the Battle of Bull Run. The Battle of Fort Sumter is thought to be the battle that started it all. The South became pretty cocky, and so the Union surprised the Confederacy at the Battle of Shiloh, and, as a result, tens of thousands died. There was a battle at Antietam, and right after that, President Lincoln tried to put some pressure on the South, so he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed all slaves. This was followed by a defeat of the Confederacy at Gettysburg and Vicksburg. Vicksburg gave the Union control of the Mississippi, which split the Confederacy in half. At the Battle of Gettysburg, 50,000 died.
In all, there was around 50 major battles and 100 other battles that had significance. 650,000 casualties were produced, and the Civil War became the bloodiest battle that Americans have ever fought in.